Morning. Today for math, we're going to talk about comparing decimals. But before we get started, I want to review a few things that we've talked about the past couple of days. The first is taking fractions and converting them into decimals. So let's look at this picture here. What fraction do these fraction squares represent? We can see that there are 3 wholes, and then there are 7/10 that are filled in yellow. So we can represent these fraction squares as a fraction, a mixed number 3 and 7/10. We can also write this breaking up as 3 wholes plus 7/10. And we can take this mixed number and convert it into a decimal, which we can say as 3.7 or 3 and 7/10. Remember, that decimal point also says and, 3 and 7/10. Remember that the decimal is made up of those two parts, the whole number and the fractional part, with a decimal point that's separating them. We can also represent decimals as fractions. So if we look at this picture here, we see that there's 1 whole and there are 3/10. The decimal represented by this is 1.3. If we wanted to write it as a fraction, we would think of those parts, the 1 whole and 3/10. And as a mixed number, we would then write 1 and 3/10. And again, we talked yesterday about how sometimes when we convert decimals into fractions, we see that the end result is not in its simplest form. So we might need to change it. And when we convert the decimal 0.4 into a fraction, we see this. We get 4/10, and we know that 4/10 is not in its simplest form. We can simplify 4/10 by thinking of the common factors and picking the largest one. In this case, the largest common factor is 2, so we can divide both the numerator and denominator by 2, making 4/10 equal 2/5 in its simplest form. So now that we remember what we've learned, we're going to talk about how to compare decimals. So let's look at these two here. This decimal equals 2.2, or 2 and 2/10, while this one equals 1.3, or 1 and 3/10. So we're going to compare these two decimals. How do we do that? Well, remember, when we're comparing decimals, we're looking at the digits that are in the same place in each number, and we're starting in the digits in the highest place. So the digit in the highest place here will be the digit in the ones place. So since 1 is smaller than 2 ones, we know that 1.3 is less than 1.2. And we can write that here, 1.3 is less than 2.2. Let's look at some more examples. We see here 1.2 and 1.3. Let's compare these two decimals. Again, we'll start with the whole number, except here we see that the whole number is 1, which is the same. So we have to keep looking at the number in the 10th place. Since 3/10 is greater than 2/10, this number here, 1.3, is greater than 1.2. Or another way we could say this is 1.2 is less than 1.3. Let's look at another example. 2 and 1.3. When we're comparing these two decimals, we'll start as always by looking at the highest number. And here, since 1 is smaller than 2 ones, we know that 1.3 is less than 2.2. So we're always going to start by looking at the highest number. And if those are different, we have our answer. If those are the same, we will continue and keep going through the number. So here we're going to practice a few together. Number 1 asks which number is the smallest, and it gives 4 choices. So we're going to look at all the numbers in the ones place. I see a 1, 0, 1, and 0. And I notice that there are 2 zeros. So right away, we know that C and A we can eliminate. They are not the smallest. So we look here at 0.5 and 0.2, and I can see that 2/10 is smaller than 5/10. So I know that D, 0.2, is the smallest of these numbers. Now, number 2 is asking which is the greatest. So again, I'm going to look at all the numbers in the ones place, but I notice that they are all 3. So I can't be done. I need to look at the digits in the tenths place. I see here that 7/10 is the biggest. So I know that C, 3.7, is the greatest number of those choices. Now that we've talked about comparing decimals, I want to talk about how we can put them in order, either from smallest to greatest or from greatest to smallest. Another way to say least to greatest is putting the decimals in increasing order because they're getting bigger from least to greatest. So let's look at these 3 decimals, 1.3, 2, and 1.2. First, again, we'll look at the whole numbers as we did when we were comparing just 2 decimals. We notice that 2 of these 3 decimals have a 1 in the ones place. So we know that one of those is going to start our list, but we don't know yet which one. We need to look at the tenths. We know that 2/10 is smaller than 3/10. So now we've figured out that 1.2 is the smallest number. This also then tells us that 1.3 comes next and that 2 is the greatest number. So the numbers in increasing order would be 1.2, 1.3, and 2. Now let's talk about putting the numbers in decreasing order. This means they're going down from the greatest to the least. So we have 1.6, 1, and 0.2. We're going to start off by looking at the whole numbers. There are 2 that have a 1 in the ones place, so we know that we can look at the tenths. 6/10 is greater than 0/10, so 1.6 at the top is the biggest number. This then tells us that 1 comes next, and so of course 0.2 is the smallest number. So in decreasing order, the numbers would be 1.6, 1, and 0.2. We'll practice again another one putting the numbers in increasing order. We'll look at the numbers in the ones place and notice the smaller one is 0. So 0.3 would automatically come first. Then we'd notice the 1 in the ones place, and we could see that 1.3 would come next. Now letters A and C both have a 3 in the ones place, so we need to look at the tenths. Since 0/10 is less than 1/10, 3 comes next, and 3.1 comes last. So when we're putting these numbers in increasing order, they would be 0.3, 1.3, 3, and 3.1. Don't let the fact that there are similar digits in these confuse you. Make sure that you're always looking at the highest number. So in this case, it would be the digit in the ones. And if those are different, you have your answer. And if those are the same, remember to keep moving to the right in the number and go to the digit in the tenths place. So today's assignment is to complete page 15 in your workbook and to complete a worksheet called Decimals Worksheet 1.